In the middle is an anomaly. Now I want to tell you a little bit about anomaly. So an anomaly is the unexpected that emerges when you're laying down a routine on the world. You want the world to do something, but it does something else. We've talked about that a lot. What does it do that's something else? Here's a way of thinking about it. So, the word phenomenon, comes from a Greek word, phanesthai, and that word means to shine forth. So an anomaly is something that shines forth. And you might say, well, what does that mean to me? And I would say, well, you can watch for this. Like, all you have to do is watch. In the next week, watch the things that attract your attention. Because they will. There are things that will automatically attract your attention. You get interested in them. You know, or they catch the corner of your eye. And you have to look at them. I mean, and those are the things that are shining forth in some sense. And the idea that they're shining forth is actually quite an accurate idea, because here's a way of looking at your perception. So, you know, I mentioned that my little daughter would take all these like foil things and make suns out of them. She was always making one weird thing out of something that we'd already categorized. So here's something to think about. What do you see when you look at the world? And the answer is, mostly you see your memory. Because you're not smart enough to actually see the world. It's too damn complicated. So you've spent a lot of time seeing the world. And so you've built up all these representations of the world. And so now when you see the world, you use the representations. Because why the hell wouldn't you? It's just so hard to look at the world. So once you learn to do it, you're going to use what you've learned. And then what you see is what you've learned. You don't see the world. And so I could even say that as long as things are going your way, you never see the world. You only see your representations of the world. And so then you might say, well, what's behind that representation? Well, what's behind the representation is the thing that shines forth. Now, I think people experience this when they take hallucinogenic drugs. Because I think what the hallucinogenic drugs do, in part, is stop them from seeing their memories. And then they see the unknown as such more, although you can never see the unknown as such. But everything that's no longer hyper attractive and new and fresh and vital revitalizes. That's what Huxley reported in The Doors of Perception. And we know that if you're pre-exposed to a stimulus, and the stimulus means nothing, so first of all, something pops up and it attracts your attention, but then you see it again and again and again and again and again and again and again, you habituate to it. And then it no longer has any effect on you. It becomes invisible. I don't really believe that you habituate. I think it's the wrong word. You habituate if it's the kind of stimuli that your spinal cord could process. You know, so if you take a snail and it comes out of its shell and you tap it, it'll go into its shell and then it'll come out, and you tap it, it'll go into its shell and it'll come out. You keep doing that, sooner or later you can tap the snail and it won't go into its shell. And the reason is that the snail has figured out that tap does not imply an event that would require a snail to pull into its shell. Now, it hasn't done that because it's all reflex. But in people, we still have those simple reflexes that can just habituate, but then we have much more complex models of the world that we have to actively engage in constructing, and also once we construct those, they can stop us from reacting to the stimulus. Now think about it. Here you are in this room. Look at everything around you, which you can't do, by the way, but look at everything around you. How many of those things are you reacting to? And the answer is none. Really. So I bet I could take half of you out of this room. I could take all of you out of this room and half of you wouldn't know what color the room is. Well, right. As long, now, because that's all of a sudden then it shines forth. It's like, oh, now that has meaning again. You wouldn't know what color those sound absorbing panels on the back are. You probably wouldn't even know that those are there. You wouldn't know the color of the floor or the design on the floor. You might not even know the color of the chairs. And why would that be? It's because, well, why is it? Why wouldn't you know those things that you've been exposed to so often? And part of the answer to that is, and this is an interesting way of thinking about it, it doesn't matter. Well, then you might think, well, what does matter mean? Because matter is a weird word, right? Because things are made out of matter, right? But you can also think that things are made out of what matters. And it's actually more accurate to think of things as being made out of what matters. And that what happens when you build a model of what matters is that most of it stops mattering. And that's okay, because, you know, you don't want to be overwhelmed by everything all the time. I mean, maybe that's a paradisal or maybe a hellish experience, but it makes you non-functional. There's just not enough of you to process everything all the time. So you zero everything out by building a model of it, and the model says, this is zero, it's irrelevant, it has no bearing whatsoever on what you're trying to accomplish in this time and place. And it ceases to draw your attention. Now then you think, wait a sec, not everything has ceased to draw my attention. Now that's a strange thing. That's a strange thing. You remember that little snitch thing that Harry Potter used to chase around when he was playing Quidditch? That's the unknown, by the way. That's actually a symbol of the unknown. It's called the winged chaos. And I had no idea how the hell J.K. Rowling knew about the winged chaos, or the round chaos is another way of describing. Because if you put round chaos into Google, the only thing you get is my website. Now, it's something I took from Jung, but it's pretty damn obscure. But apparently she studied a lot of alchemy before she wrote Harry Potter. And that knowledge, consciously or not, made it into, she's pretty damn smart, so it's, but she's creative, you know, so if you're creative, there's always a dance between your consciousness and your unconscious mind, a creative dance. Things emerge and you play with them, and they emerge and you play with them. Like the writers I know, their characters come alive for them, and they just write down what the characters are likely to do, you know, and there's going to be some conscious direction, but it's this dance between unconsciousness and consciousness that really makes up creativity. But anyways, you know, in the Harry Potter Quidditch game, what happens when Harry gets the little ball? Right. So there's really two games going on at the same time, right? There's the game everyone else is playing, and then there's the game that the seeker is playing. And when the seeker wins, everyone wins. That's the rule in Quidditch. And that's the rule. When the seeker wins, everyone wins. That's the rule. And that's an archetype too. So, and the round chaos, the thing that Harry's chasing, that's the coolest thing, because that was the alchemical representation of matter. And it was a container. And it contained, it's like the dragon in some sense, it contained matter and spirit. And if you caught it, then you could inculcate the matter, or the spirit, and utilize the matter. Now, back to what attracts your attention. I hate to say this, but because what attracts your attention is the same thing that Harry's chasing in the Quidditch games. It's the same thing. Now, it's the category of what attracts your attention. Now, Jung was very interested in this. He thought that what attracted your attention was a consequence of the manifestation of the higher self. The self is what he called it. The self is what you are. The ego is what you think you are. And it might also, that's close enough. The self is what you actually are. Well, you have no idea what you actually are because you don't know very much about yourself, and you're really, 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 really complicated. And there's lots of things going on that you have no idea about, and the world is a really strange place. And the self is also the thing that you are now, and the thing that you were, and all of the things that you could potentially become.